So, just in order to get started, let's just start with a quick poll, which I'm going to open up now. And what I'd like to do is, if you could answer this question, which is hopefully appearing on your screen, which of these do you think gets in the way of inclusion most in your team? Is it people don't feel safe being open or honest? People avoid having difficult conversations. People go along with things but don't really commit. No one's really owning inclusion. It's always somebody else's job. Inclusion isn't linked to what success looks like. So I'll just give you a chance. Got 5 people responded so far, so wait for a few more responses. Great. So we're at 69% response rate. Great. Okay, I'm going to end the poll there. And let's see what the results are. So share results. Cool. Okay. So it looks like the majority is people avoid having difficult conversations, followed by people don't feel safe being open or honest, or inclusion isn't linked to what success looks like. Excellent. So just going to open it up for just general discussion. What are your thoughts or feelings about these results on the screen? Just unmute yourself and share your thoughts or feelings with us. Anything surprising there?
Morning.
Hiya,
Sorry,
morning.
I was just getting my headset on so as not to disturb my colleagues. I think I probably would. Lovely to meet you all, by the way, and thank you, Toby, for the session. Already looking forward to it. I think I would have probably selected more than one if I could. So, the difficult conversations for me is closely followed by people not feeling safe about being open or honest.
Yeah.
We've got an inclusive team here at Co-op Live, and everybody actually does want to be involved and take ownership. But
Yeah.
I think the big barrier that we have is around those difficult conversations, closely linked to saying the wrong thing without
Mm.
without meaning to. So that then stops any conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a common issue. I hear it everywhere. Um, yeah, and that's why Brooklyn designed Help I'm Scared of Saying the Wrong Thing, to address that very concern that people have. And I think also it becomes an issue with the more senior you go in an organization as well, you start to get things like imposter syndrome. So senior leaders are like saying things like, well, I'm senior enough that I should know what to say or do. Or I'm so senior, I don't want to say the wrong thing or put my foot in it because I'm worried that I'm going to be quote unquote cancelled, um, or it might backfire on me. Yeah. So yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And thanks everyone for sort of continuing to share things in the chat. Continue to use the chat if you've got any ideas or you want to kind of link to resources. One of the benefits of just bringing everyone together is that you might have read something recently or listened to something recently that really is helpful for this topic, and you can just share it in the chat, and then it's good to share that kind of learning and knowledge. Cool. So Patrick Lencioni's model was created. It's based, well, the book is called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. What Patrick Lencioni came up with was 5 dysfunctions of badly performing teams or low performing teams, and then kind of for each challenging behavior, he kind of proposes what good looks like. Has anyone read the book Five Dysfunctions of a Team? Just kind of wave at me down the camera, or yeah, a few people have read it, a few people haven't. I mean, it's not an EDI book, but it is a very useful book that you can use with EDI in terms of being able to build inclusive team cultures and inclusive leadership behaviors. So it's this pyramid, and we're going to start at the bottom of the pyramid. And the first level of the pyramid is badly performing teams have a lack of trust. So that leads to guardedness, people being closed, people feeling not able to speak up, share ideas because they're worried about any kind of fear of retribution or backlash. If they're working in that kind of low trust environment. Whereas if you've got a high degree of trust, then teams are going to be more open with one another. They're going to be more vulnerable with each other. They're going to share more amongst each other. So we kind of go from teams avoiding vulnerability to and kind of have a fear of admitting that they don't know the answer or they don't know things, or they're scared of saying the wrong thing, or they're worried about being judged. So some of the practical actions that leaders can do is to model vulnerability. If you read a kind of book a management book in the 80s, you wouldn't have seen this word written in the book because vulnerability was seen as a weakness. Nowadays, we talk about vulnerability as being a strength. And what that means, and I like to link it up with humility, actually, vulnerability and humility. So if the word vulnerability doesn't quite work for you, because a lot of leaders still, they have a bit of an icky effect with it. Humility, I think, works quite well. They say things like, well, I don't know all of the answers, but I'm going to go and find out. Or I'm really sorry I put my foot in it. I didn't mean to cause offense, but I'm going to learn from this experience and we can move forwards together. Or you can use various tools to help develop psychological safety. So one of the tools that we like to use, and I think this will be a topic for another webinar, is the thinking environment, which was created by Nancy Klein. She wrote a really good book called Time to Think. But the thinking environment is a framework or a model around inclusive facilitation. And she came up with some really good principles about how you can create a space that allows people to really have a greater quality of thought and really listen deeply to one another. So it's worth Googling the thinking environment or Nancy's book, Time to Think. The next level on the pyramid is conflict. So Patrick Lencioni says that badly performing teams will avoid conflict. So they will not have those difficult, awkward conversations. They will brush things under the carpet. They will, they won't challenge ideas or people directly. And that leads to a buildup of resentment within the team. Whereas higher performing teams, they're able to have a really good level of candidness with one another. And another really good book that I think really helps here is called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, who's an ex-Googler. And she talks about radical candor being this kind of intersection between challenging directly, but with care. A trap that a lot of people fall into is what she calls ruinous empathy, which is where we care so much that we don't want to challenge people directly. And she gives this quite funny example in her book where she says, imagine a colleague is like leaving the toilet in your office and they've got toilet paper stuck to the bottom of their shoe and they're trailing it across the office floor. She says that you might think, oh, I don't want to like go up and cause a scene or embarrass them or highlight the issue to them because you're worried that it might embarrass them. And she's saying that's ruinous empathy. Radical candor would be going up to the person and saying, oh, I don't want you to go around the office with toilet paper stuck to your shoe and to be embarrassed by that and to kind of call it out. So it's an example that she gives in her book. But so yeah, it kind of creates this artificial harmony. And therefore, we tend to be silent on the topics that we should be talking about in the workplace around things like race or disability or privilege, because we want to avoid discomfort. So some actions that we can take are setting some ground rules with the team about how do we actually challenge one another respectfully. What does that look like for our team and our team culture? Or structuring conversations. A tool that I quite like to use is Six Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono. And each hat represents a different perspective. So you've got like one colored hat represents the data, facts, figures. Another colored hat represents feelings, emotions. Another colored hat represents the positivity or the upside. Another colored hat represents the downside or the risks or the issues. And what you can do is kind of think, okay, what you can allocate the hat to different team members. So I could say, oh, Natalie, I want you to wear the red hat today. I want you to come to this meeting and think about what are people thinking about, or what are people feeling, or what emotions might people be having about this issue that we're facing on our team. Or I might say, Gillian, I want you to wear the black hat. I want you to come to me with just the risks, the issues, the problems, the downside. Donna, I want you to wear the green hat. I want you to think about all of the creative ways that we could solve this problem. What's some out of the box way of thinking of this? So it's a good tool or good technique to help bring in different perspectives. Then the third level on the pyramid is a lack of commitment. That's what kind of low performing teams have. Whereas high performing teams, they have a high degree of commitment to what they are working on or the company that they work on. So in a low performing team, that leads to hesitancy, low performance, not getting things done. Whereas in a high performing team, it leads to a greater degree of clarity. So when we look at this from an EDI perspective, it could be that people are not buying into EDI because they feel like their views haven't been taken on board or heard. Or people might feel like, oh, we're not committed to this really as an organization. It's all a bit performative. It's all a bit of a tick box exercise. Or we've got the policy, but we're not really following through. We've got a policy about respect in the workplace, but actually my manager day to day is displaying non-inclusive behaviors, for instance. So there's kind of that lack of commitment. So the tangible actions that we can do here are really to make sure that everybody's voice gets heard early as possible, especially those underrepresented voices in the organization, and that we're aligning your EDI goals to your broader team goals or your broader organizational goals, because quite often EDI is seen as this thing that's done on the side of the business. Well, when it's done properly, it can actually help your business grow and prosper and develop. So how does ED&I help you do a better job delivering on your purpose or your mission as an organization? So the penultimate one is around accountability. So poorly performing teams, they don't have enough accountability going on. Whereas higher performing teams, they will hold each other to accountable. So in lower performing teams, this leads to kind of flakiness. Whereas in higher performing teams, you set high standards for other people and you set high standards for yourself and your team as a whole. So what we see is from an EDI perspective is that there just might not be, any ownership of the outcomes. The EDI is seen as HR department's responsibility, that it's not seen as a shared responsibility across the whole of the organization, that every senior leader in the business has got a stake in the game. So one of the things that you can do is create a RACI matrix. This is something that I learned when I was a project manager. RACI is an acronym. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted with, and informed. So you can list out all of the people that you collaborate with and allocate them to one of these 4 boxes. So responsible people are the ones that actually do the work. So for example, let's say we're all working together on developing a inclusive leadership development program for our senior leadership team, for example. It might be that Donna and I are responsible because we're the ones that are actually pulling the content together and creating it and organizing it. But Alison, for example, is the actual sponsor. So she's going to be accountable. Ultimately, if this project doesn't go well, then accountability sits with Alison. But we might consult with Nikki, for example, sorry, Natalie and Gillian, for example, because they're either internal experts or external experts, or they've got some sort of perspective on something. And it might be that we just keep Catherine informed of what's going on, that she needs to be kept in the loop, for example. So that's how we can divvy it up. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, you've got results. So a low performing team will have a lack of focus on results. And that can lead to basically status games playing out. Whereas a high performing teams, they're really focused on the end result or the end game. And they have that collective success as a team. So rather than focusing on sort of personal successes and then creating your own kind of power dynamics, you need to shift that mindset to the team outcomes. And it might be that in what we find in EDI is that there are individuals that are resistant towards change because they just don't understand how it's benefiting them and their team. So what you can do is you can use data to try and track inclusivity metrics around things like team performance, engagement, employee retention, time in grade, promotion rates through the organization, because surfacing that data helps build up this kind of accountability and results. So if we can look at the data and go, actually, over the last 3 years, we've seen employee engagement from this particular cohort increased by X%. That's, that helps us have that shared ownership and that shared focus on the end result. And we want to ultimately link our day-to-day behaviors back to metrics, because it's our day-to-day behaviors that are creating the culture of the teams that we work within. We want to have a way of measuring what those behaviors are, for instance. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the model. I know that was a big download. So hopefully, obviously we're recording this session, so you can always rewatch it and catch up afterwards. And I'll do a bit of a write-up afterwards. But what I'd like to do now is just put people into breakout rooms for like maybe 5-10 minutes. And what I'd like to, in your breakout rooms, is talk to each other about, have you done anything in one of any of the 5 areas of the 5 dysfunctions of a team model that have helped your team be more inclusive, and what happened? So yeah, we're just talking about what's worked well. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. I'm just going to pause the recording while we're doing this as well, and then we can reconvene it when we get back. Okay, I'm going to resume recording. A sec. Okay, so here we go. So yeah, what came up for you in your breakout group discussions? How have you managed to tackle any of the 5 areas on Patrick Lencioni's pyramid? Just unmute yourself and share it with us.
So I'm happy to start, Toby, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, thanks.
So in our group, we talked about, starting somewhere and doing some things and not fearing not being able to achieve everything as an excuse to not do anything. So start somewhere, take some steps and do something with, the most willing sort of volunteers initially, if that's a good place to start for your organization.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, getting those early adopters on board. Yeah, absolutely. which level of the pyramid do you think that belongs to?
Well, probably cuts across most of it, to be honest.
Mm,
So it's getting people to move, individuals to move up the pyramid, as it were,
mm,
but not thinking absolutely everybody's got to move at the same pace, and that people will move, be in different places. Like sometimes they might be in the mood for collective success, sometimes they might be playing a status game. That people aren't it, at one extreme or the other permanently. That people
yeah,
fluctuate, individuals fluctuate within that
yeah,
as well as the whole
definitely.
organization moving within
Yeah,
that.
cool. Thanks, Alison. Thank you. Anyone else? What came up for you in your group conversations? What's worked well for you?
I can go next. We talked about how, like at my last company, there was a lot of like theoretical, like on paper, the policies seemed really good and were really inclusive, but like in reality, they weren't, unfortunately. So that was something that was quite frustrating, and I think that's quite common across many companies. So yeah, difficult to say really on the. It depends. Like people who were just joining the company found like it was really good, right? They felt like supported and they felt like there were many opportunities. But when you stayed a bit longer, you realize that like, oh, this opportunity is actually only available for like 0.1% of the staff
Yep.
because there's not enough budget. And it was something, as soon as there were budget cuts, it was the thing that was gone as well, unfortunately. They were really strong at ERGs, which we talked about a bit as well. So they were cool, like employee-led groups for different, different sectors of the employee. So that was cool and that was supportive. But I think even there was frustration as well that they had to do it themselves, kind of, that there weren't budgets for it as well. And it was often outside of people's work hours that they had to do the extra work and organization.
Yeah. So it sounds like from what you're saying, there's a mixture of like lack of results and lack of accountability there. Because it's like we haven't quite connected the dots between the importance of EDI and the business strategy. And then there's a lack of accountability of like, well, who's actually going to do the work? It's done as a on the side of the desk activity rather than getting it embedded into the DNA of the organization.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Any other thoughts from anybody else about applying the model to EDI?
I'm happy to go next, Toby.
Yeah,
I think I was working with Danielle. Sorry, the other person that was in our group wasn't actually there. It was like their note taker. So there's just two of us. But
okay.
we talked. Well, my best example was holding each other accountable and committing as a team, because we have some great ideas, some great initiatives. Everybody in the group gets involved in different things across the business. But then when it comes down to the delivery of said initiative, whether that's content or an activity or a workshop, or it generally ends up then falling back to the HR team.
Yeah.
So there's just a whole lack of ownership from individuals, even though throughout the project they have been part of it and engaged with it. And I sometimes put that down to pressure of work and workload and fitting it in, and the business not recognizing that we're resourcing it in the right way.
Yeah.
So we talked about that, and then a lady that I was talking to made some really good points about the business that she works in, and because they're more aligned, their values and behaviours and the sector that they work in around being inclusive. We talked about how people can come into the business with a better mindset in that regard, as opposed to within different sectors, it can be more challenging because it's not part of the culture already, if that makes sense. So that they were working in a charitable background.
Yeah. mindset is really important, because from a leadership perspective, you want senior leaders to understand why EDI is important and how it helps the business grow and prosper and succeed. And yeah, and I've been working with one client. They're a consultancy company in the renewable energy market, and they've come up with, rather than kind of having like an EDI strategy, for now, what they've come up with is like a set of leadership principles. And that's their way of trying to just get it ingrained, because they're starting at that senior level of the organization and getting those senior leaders to role model. And it's not just about inclusive leadership behaviors for them. They are there, but they're talking about things like, work-life balance, for example. It's just about how they're creating the right culture in the organization. Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing your insights on that. Let's do one more poll. So for this one, quick question is, let me launch the right one. Okay, so how confident do you feel about using the 5 dysfunctions model to support inclusion in your team? And it ranges from not confident, I need support, a bit more confident, fairly confident, or very confident. Brilliant. Excellent. All right, I'll end the poll. And yep, share results. Yeah, so vast majority of people are feeling a bit more confident, got some ideas from today, which they could try and take away, which is really good. That's the whole purpose of running these sessions. So that's good to see. So thank you for sharing that with me. If you do want to just have a chat with me afterwards, I'm going to just pop my diary link in the chat box. So if you want to just have a half an hour chat with me about what we've talked about today, and how you can apply it to your organization, by all means do that. Having a conversation with me will just help you get unstuck. I might be able to give you some pointers, links to resources or things that will just help save you some time or stress. It's always good to just kind of bounce ideas off somebody, might help you get some momentum, that kind of thing. So have a half an hour call with me. You'll leave with a kind of a 3-point plan. For the avoidance of any doubt, it's not a sales conversation. It's purely a I'm here to help you half an hour conversation. So if we've touched on anything today that you think, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to apply that to my organization, but I'm not sure how, or I've got this particular EDI problem, just not sure where to begin, then just book half an hour with me and we can try and get to the bottom of that for you. And then finally, the next webinar that I'll be doing is in a fortnight from today. The title of which is Beyond Tick Boxes, How to Use Data for Real Inclusion Progress. So I'll be talking about how we can actually collect data and use data to help us formulate our EDI strategies and plans so that we're taking targeted action where it's most needed, and we're not just having this kind of scattergun approach of EDI initiatives that don't really stick or don't really make a dent in the world that we would hope it to make. So thanks ever so much for joining me this morning. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought to take away and apply to your organization. And as always, I'm here to help if you need any further support. But yeah, enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you in a fortnight, if not before. Take care.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.